You're listening to When the Lies Began. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tracing just a chilling trajectory, the complete chronological breakdown of the Chris Coleman case. This is really a story about a man who built this life, so outwardly perfect, so high stakes, that when he decided he needed a new one, well, the only way forward, at least in his mind, was absolute destruction and betrayal.
Yeah. Our goal in this deep dive is, I think, to move past the sort of shocking headlines and really scrutinize the mechanics of his deception. How did he do it?
Exactly.
We're going to follow the timeline of the lies, like from that very first moment of infidelity through this really elaborate staged campaign of threats he created.
Right up to the end.
Right up to that final, almost mundane piece of circumstantial evidence that just shattered his whole alibi, his whole carefully constructed story.
We want to show you really piece by piece exactly when that narrative, the story he was telling of being a victim, when that just turned into the cold reality of him being a murderer.
And the initial shock of this tragedy, you really have to understand, it was massive because it happened in Columbia, Illinois. This is like a quiet, pretty close-knit suburb outside St. Louis. Violent crime there, basically non-existent.
Right. And Chris Coleman, here's this guy, a former Marine, son of a preacher, living in this idyllic place. He was seen as like the pillar of responsibility.
And that image, that whole persona, was tied directly to his job. He was the security chief for Joyce Meyer, one of the world's most recognizable televangelists.
Joyce Meyer Ministries, JMM.
Yep, running security for JMM. And this wasn't just any job. It was high profile, high income. He was earning around $100,000 a year.
Which was huge money then, especially for that community. He lived pretty large.
Absolutely. But that whole illusion, that perfect picture, it just completely shattered on the morning of May 5th, 2009.
That's the day. That's when Chris's wife, Cherie Coleman, she was 31, and their two young sons, Garrett, who was 11, and Gavin, just 9. They were found strangled to death in their own beds.
And what made that initial scene so terrifying, and also what immediately pointed the authorities towards this whole stage threat idea, was the staging itself. It was so dramatic.
Yeah.
The walls of their home were like drenched in this angry, vulgar red spray paint. Messages like, "Punished, F you, bitch," and "I'm always watching," just scrawled everywhere.
It looked exactly like the grim theatrical fulfillment of months of these elaborate threats Chris himself had been reporting, threats he said he was receiving. But as we dig into the sources, the question becomes, was this really the work of some external enemy targeting Joyce Meyer's organization? Or was it the ultimate desperate act of a man trying to stage his own escape?
And to answer that, yeah, we've got to rewind. We need to go back to the moment that facade first started cracking, back in the fall in 2008.
Okay, let's unpack the stakes here. Part 1, the foundations of the lie. Late 2008, early 2009.
Right.
The Coleman family facade, their lifestyle, was directly funded by his job at JMM. That $100,000 salary came with a huge catch, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely enormous. JMM, being this prominent ministry, had a strict zero-tolerance policy about adultery. No wiggle room.
So that policy becomes the absolute hinge for this entire tragedy. If Chris wanted a divorce, and it was because of his own fault, like admitting he was having an affair, he'd lose that job instantly.
And losing the job wasn't just about the money, though that was huge. It meant losing the comfortable life, the status, the financial stability, everything that allowed him to even think about pursuing this new future he wanted.
And that desire for a new future, it seems to have really kicked off in the fall of 2008. In fact, hey, this is when Chris began this pretty intense affair with a woman named Tara Lentz.
And the really cruel part here, Tara wasn't just some random person he met. She was a cocktail waitress down in Florida, yes, but she was also a childhood friend of his wife, Cherie.
Oof. That's brutal.
It adds another layer of betrayal, doesn't it? And what's fascinating, based on the evidence, this wasn't just a fling, it wasn't a brief indiscretion. This was planned. It felt like a long-term commitment from the get-go.
How do we know that? What did investigators find?
Well, they found these meticulous notes on Chris's computer, dated as early as November 5th, 2008. And in them, he wrote explicitly that Tara changed his life.
Wow. November 5th, okay.
And they went all in. Like you said, they actually exchanged promise rings, symbols of their commitment to get married.
Promise rings, okay.
They traveled together using his work trips for JMM as cover, including a pretty expensive vacation to Hawaii in mid-April 2009, just weeks before the murders.
Mid-April, so close to.
Okay, wow. And the planning, it was detailed. They discussed getting married. They even settled on a name for their future daughter. Zoe Lynn Coleman. In fact, it was all laid out.
Zoe Lynn Coleman. So this wasn't just a fantasy.
Not at all. And Tara, she was apparently applying pressure, too. Siri records showed she had a literal date marked on her calendar. Scheduled wedding to Chris Coleman.
A scheduled wedding date on her calendar.
Yeah. So this wasn't some vague, maybe someday plan. It was a firm date. And Chris was, basically running out of time to get this divorce sorted and keep his six-figure income.
Okay, so there's the motive, right? The prosecution later framed it as just total selfishness, financial preservation.
Pretty much. He was described as being completely enraptured by Tara Lynch, desperate for this new life. But that JMM policy, it meant divorce was impossible without losing everything,
Unless he could somehow frame himself as a victim, or find some other way out that didn't involve him admitting fault. He was, like you said, financially cornered, completely trapped by his own choices.
And Cherie knew. Faxi, too, we know she knew, which must have created this incredibly tense, just toxic environment inside that house.
Yeah, she confided in friends, talked about the marriage collapsing, about Chris pushing aggressively for a divorce. She apparently told people he was saying she was ruining his life because she wouldn't just give him what he wanted.
And her fear, it's just tragically prophetic looking back. In fact, Cherie's friend, Kathy LaPlanta, she later testified about this chilling conversation where Cherie told her, flat out, if anything ever happened to her, Chris did it.
Oh, my.
And there was another incident. During a really heated argument about the divorce, Cherie supposedly yelled right at Chris, "What are you going to do? Kill me?"
Just wow. The foreshadowing is unbelievable.
And she knew about Tara, too. In fact, she'd figured out the root of his sudden desire for divorce. Over the holidays that year, Cherie showed another friend, Jessica Wade, a Facebook photo of Tara Lynch.
What'd she say?
She asked her, apparently very bitterly, "You want to see the woman my husband's having an affair with?" So Cherie knew her marriage was dead, but maybe she wasn't going to give him the easy out he needed to keep his career intact.
So this realization that he couldn't get the divorce without losing his job, and he couldn't keep Tara happy without the divorce.
Yeah.
That seems like the tipping point, doesn't it? Theory.
It looks that way, and the timing is just stark. Just 9 days after he apparently finalized his commitment to Tara on paper in those computer notes.
November 5th.
9 days later, the whole landscape of this case shifts completely, because that's when he started creating his enemy, his external threat.
Right. Part 2. Manufacture of the Monster, the Staged Threat Campaign. This runs from November 2008 right up to May 2009. Fact CT.
Yeah, and the creation of this external threat, it wasn't haphazard. It was a highly sophisticated, very calculated effort.
Yeah.
Faxi started almost immediately after that November 5th note where he declared Tara changed his life.
So what did he do first?
He initiated what investigators later called this sophisticated campaign of self-threat, basically designing a narrative that some dangerous, dedicated outsider was targeting his family because of his job at JMM.
Okay, let's get specific. The threat started as emails.
Emails, yeah. On November 14th, 2008, sent from an anonymous-sounding account, destroychris@gmail.com, and importantly, they were sent to his work accounts.
Okay, so aimed at his employment.
Exactly. And the content was really calculated. They didn't just threaten him personally. They targeted his career, his connection to JMM.
What did they say?
The messages demanded he quit JMM immediately, or his family would pay the price. The language was super violent, really graphic. One quote was, "I will kill them all while they sleep." Back.
Lame.
And another email, clearly designed to sound like a threat against JMM itself, stated, "If I can't get to Joyce, then I will get to someone close to her." Fact. See how that works. It positions Chris as the noble bodyguard, the martyr almost, and his family as collateral damage in some crusade against the ministry.
It's diabolically clever in a way, shifting the focus entirely.
And the escalation was deliberate too. It wasn't just emails. Soon, physical letters started showing up in the Coleman mailbox.
Making you seem more real, more persistent.
Precisely. In January 2009, a letter demanded, "Deny your God publicly or else." In fact, playing up this narrative of, external religious fanaticism, he kept that theme going right up until the end.
And the final letter.
The final one, really chilling, arrived on April 27th, just about a week before the murders. It ended with, "This is my last warning. Your worst nightmare is about to happen." And then, that ominous sign-off, "I'm always watching."
I'm always watching. Wow, that was the setup for the crime scene paint later.
It seems like it. This was the theatrical climax, signaling that the fictional monster he'd invented was about to make its move.
And through all this, Chris is reporting everything diligently to the police, right?
Yeah.
Playing the role of the concerned victim.
Oh, absolutely. Fact, he looks like the model victim. He made sure patrols were stepped up in his neighborhood. And here's where his maybe arrogance or just overconfidence really shows.
What happened?
Joyce Meyer Ministries, his employer, actually offered to pay for a state-of-the-art home security system for him.
Okay, that seems like a logical step.
You'd think, but Chris declined. Fact, he turned it down, supposedly saying something like, "We don't need one. Cherie's got a gun and she knows how to use it."
He refused the security system. Why would he do that?
Well, think about it. Why refuse the ultimate deterrent? Unless that security system would inevitably capture the real perpetrator himself entering or leaving at times he shouldn't have been. Theory.
That refusal just screams guilt, doesn't it?
It's almost as damning as the threats themselves, looking back. But kind of ironically, he was under surveillance anyway, just not in the way he thought.
Oh, so.
Remember that final scary letter on April 27th? His neighbor, Justin Barlow, who happened to be an off-duty police sergeant, got concerned.
Okay.
So Barlow set up his own surveillance camera, SVC, and he pointed it directly at the Coleman mailbox, hoping to catch whoever was leaving the letters. And Chris knew about this camera.
He knew the neighbor had a camera pointed at his house.
Yep. Which later provided some pretty crucial visual evidence, or rather lack of evidence of anyone else.
Okay, so the stage is set, the threats are reported, he's refused security, but then the tech catches up with him.
Completely. The whole campaign of self-threat just collapsed when the forensic computer experts got involved. FSKC, they analyzed his laptop, the emails.
And what do they find?
They testified definitively that the threat emails were typed on his laptop and originated from his own laptop. Factually, no ambiguity.
How could they be so sure? Couldn't someone else have used his computer? Or hacked in?
That's what the defense tried to argue, but the specifics were pretty damning. When authorities subpoenaed Google for the IP addresses associated with that destroychris@gmail.com account.
The IP address. That's like the computer street address, right?
Exactly. It identifies the specific internet connection being used, and Google confirmed the source IP addresses matched Chris Coleman's home network address. Fact size. His specific modem and router.
So the emails came from inside the house.
And they could link the specific activity times to Chris's own laptop login times. It pretty much eliminated any realistic chance of some outside hacker planting those emails.
Okay, that's huge. But wasn't there more? Something about the writing itself.
Yes, and this is where it gets almost strangely personal. The linguistic evidence. Facsicty, this is where you see the killer basically failing to proofread his own deception.
Oh, so...
An expert testified about these highly specific, almost like proprietary quirks in the way the threats were written. Little errors and habits that perfectly matched Chris's other known writings. Facty.
Like what kind of quirks? Bad grammar.
More specific than that, it wasn't just common errors. The key pattern was this consistent misplacement of apostrophes in contractions. Instead of won't or don't, he'd write won't or don't, always reversed.
Fact-T.
Huh. That's oddly specific.
And he had this tendency to fuse words together, like writing have a good time is one word. Fact-T-T. Again, consistently across the threats.
Couldn't that just be like typos or maybe dyslexia like the defense suggested?
They tried that argument, yeah.
Yeah.
But the cybercrime investigators went further. They cross-referenced these exact quirks, the reversed apostrophes, the fused words with other documents found on Chris's computer, personal stuff, work stuff, things totally unrelated to the threats.
And they matched.
They match. But the real smoking gun, linguistically speaking, was one particular word.
Which one? The word opportunities. In the threat emails and letters, it was consistently misspelled as OPPURTUNITIES. Opportunities.
Opportunities.
That exact misspelling showed up not just in the threats, but also in other completely normal, non-threatening documents found on Chris's own computer. In fact, it was like his unique fingerprint on the staged crime.
Wow. So it wasn't just a random typo. It was his specific, consistent mistake.
Exactly. It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? This guy plotting a triple murder, staging this complex anti-God conspiracy, and he's undone by consistently misspelling a common word.
It really shows this incredible level of calculation, planning the threats, but also this shocking blind spot for the details in the very thing he created.
The evidence just became incontrovertible. He was the source of the threats, he was playing the victim, and he was the perpetrator planning the attack, all at once.
Okay, so that brings us to the day itself, part 3. May 5, 2009, the crime scene and the collapse of the alibi, FET.
And remember the significance of that date, May 5th. This wasn't just any day. This was the day Chris had allegedly promised Tara Lintz he would finally serve Shuri with the divorce papers.
Right, he'd apparently told Tara there was a typo or some delay the day before. So May 5th was his deadline. The deadline for his new life had arrived.
His alibi for that morning was very precise, but ultimately fatally flawed. Chris claimed he woke up early, left for the gym around 5:45 a.m.
Okay.
He said he called Shuri multiple times from the road or the gym, and when she didn't answer, which of course she couldn't, he called his neighbor, Sergeant Barlow, at 6:43 a.m., asking him to check on the family.
Making himself seem concerned from a distance.
Exactly. He then said he drove home, arriving around 6:56 a.m., just minutes after Barlow had already gone inside.
And Barlow, being the first responder on scene, he's the one who finds everything.
He finds the horrific scene, the red spray paint everywhere, the messages, and the bodies. Shuri, Garrett, and Gavin all strangled in their beds. Fessy Shur was found naked, face down.
Which investigators often see as a sign of staging, right? Degrading the victim or trying to imply a different motive, like sexual assault.
It can suggest that, yes, it adds to the picture of someone trying to manipulate the scene. But the most immediate problem for Chris wasn't the staging, it was the state of the victims themselves. Their bodies immediately destroyed his timeline.
How so?
The forensic pathologist, the famous Dr. Michael Baden, testified about rigor mortis. In fact, see it too.
Okay, rigor mortis, that's the stiffening of the body after death.
Exactly. It's a chemical process in the muscles. It typically starts setting in about 2 to 6 hours after death, peaks around 12 hours, and then fades over the next day or two. It's a fairly reliable indicator within a range.
So what did Dr. Baden find?
He testified that by 11 a.m. that morning, significant rigor mortis was already present in all 3 victims, Shuri, Garrett, and Gavin. Fact D.
Okay, so what does that mean for the time of death?
Based on the degree of rigor mortis he observed at 11 a.m., Dr. Baden opined that the deaths had occurred definitely before 5 a.m. and likely hours earlier. His estimate pointed towards maybe around 3 a.m. fashion.
3 a.m. But Chris claimed he left the house with everyone alive at 5:45 a.m.
Precisely. If the murders happened around 3 a.m., then Shuri, Garrett, and Gavin were dead for at least 2, maybe closer to 3 hours before Chris supposedly left for the gym.
His entire alibi, his whole claim timeline,
Yeah.
it's medically impossible.
Utterly impossible. And that massive time discrepancy was compounded by the other staging elements at the crime scene.
Like the window.
Yeah, the killer had moved a screen on a back basement window, clearly meant to suggest a break-in point. That is scary. But investigators found 0 damage. No broken glass, no pry marks, nothing to indicate forced entry.
So whoever did this was already inside.
That's the strong implication. It's a classic sign of staging, often seen when the killer is an intimate partner or someone with easy access to the home.
And didn't something go missing from the house?
Yes, the DVR. The recorder for the home surveillance equipment. It was gone. FCT. And crucially, Chris had installed that system himself. He knew exactly where that recorder was kept.
So the killer conveniently removed the one thing that might have recorded them.
However, remember that neighbor's camera? The ones Jeanette Barlow had pointed at the mailbox.
Yeah, the one Chris knew about.
That camera provided a huge piece of negative evidence, you could say. FCT. It showed absolutely no strangers entering or leaving the front of the Coleman home between the time Chris left at 5:43 a.m. and when Barlow arrived to check at 6:51 a.m.
So in that critical window after Chris leaves and before police arrive, nobody suspicious comes or goes from the front.
Correct. While it couldn't see the back of the house, it covered the primary access point during the time Chris was supposedly gone, further damaging the idea of an external killer sneaking in or out then.
Okay, timeline shattered, entry staged. What about physical evidence directly linking Chris?
Well, there was the twine. Near the scene, they found a piece of orange baling twine fashioned into a loop like a makeshift noose.
Okay.
Investigators quickly realized this was the exact same type of orange twine used to tie up bales of hay that were stacked right against the back of the Coleman house. Fact C.
So the potential weapon was made from materials readily available right there at the house, not something an outsider would likely bring.
It suggests the killer used what was familiar and convenient, but the most, just shocking piece of physical evidence tying Chris directly to the staging the spray paint wasn't found at the scene at all.
Where did they find it?
In his financial records, in his credit card statements.
Yeah.
Fact C.
No way!
Yes. Investigators found a credit card receipt for the purchase of the exact brand and the exact color of spray paint used on the walls. Apple Red Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch.
The exact paint.
Yeah.
And the purchase wasn't anonymous cash. It was on his credit card. bought on February 9th, 2009, months before the murders, but right smack in the middle of his staged threat campaign. And the receipt was signed, Christopher E. Coleman. He signed his name. He signed his name to the receipt for the paint he used to write, "I am always watching," after killing his family.
That's what the evidence showed. The arrogance, or maybe the sheer panic and lack of foresight, it's just astounding. He was apparently preparing the visual props for his narrative months in advance and left a paper trail.
Did he really think the police wouldn't check local stores for who bought that specific red paint, especially after he reported threats?
It really speaks to a certain kind of criminal mindset, maybe? Theory. So focused on the big lie, the grand narrative, the external threat, the affair, the alibi, that they overlook the mundane logistical details. He crafted the emails but didn't think to pay cash for the spray paint.
Incredible. Okay, so later that day, May 5th, the police interviewed Chris. What was his reaction?
Well, initially, he completely denied the affair with Tara Lynch. Fact, he just flat out lied. When they eventually told him that Cherie, Garrett, and Gavin didn't make it, he did show emotion. Reports say he wept, he sobbed, he leaned forward, head in his hands. Fact,
Which
yes.
sounds like a normal reaction, maybe.
On the surface, yes. But observers, people in the room, also noted something else. A kind of peculiar emotional detachment. He talked about the deaths in an oddly detached way, according to reports. Fact. And crucially, he showed a remarkable lack of curiosity about how his wife and children died.
What do you mean, lack of curiosity?
A grieving husband, a father whose family was just murdered.
Yeah.
You would expect questions, right? How did it happen? What did you find? Who could have done this? What are you doing to catch them? Chris apparently asked very little. He seemed more focused on maintaining his composure and his story.
And then there were the scratches.
Ah, yes, the scratches.
Yeah.
Cherie's autopsy showed clear signs she fought back violently against her killer. Fact, she had defensive wounds, bruises, including 2 black eyes. She didn't go quietly.
And Chris.
During his police interview later that day, officers noticed he had unexplained scratches and some bruising on his right arm. Fact, facts to sectors. Pretty visible marks.
And what was his explanation?
He didn't really offer one. In fact, he seemed very uncomfortable about them. Fact 2, at one point during the interview, he actually asked for a blanket, claiming he was cold despite it being May.
To cover his arm.
It seemed that way. He used the blanket to conceal the marks. And crucially, this wasn't just the police noticing late in the day. The chaplain, who had been with him in the ambulance earlier that morning, had also seen the first scratches on his arm.
Fact 2. So he couldn't claim he got them later, after the discovery.
Exactly. It undermined any potential excuse he might come up with later. The physical evidence on his own body strongly suggested he'd been in a physical struggle, consistent with Cherie fighting for her life against the killer he claimed was some external phantom.
So the alibi's gone, the staging points to him, the physical evidence like the paint receipt and the scratches. The case against him is building rapidly.
Absolutely. Which leads us to part 4, the digital web of betrayal and the trial's breakthrough. Fact.
With the alibi crushed and the physical evidence mounting, the investigation really zeroed in on quantifying the motive, making it concrete for a jury. And that's where Tara Lynch becomes absolutely crucial.
Right. Police tracked her down in St. Petersburg, Florida, and interviewed her. Fake.
Did she cooperate?
Yes, fully. Fakes D. She handed over her device's phone, computer, which contained numerous explicit videos and photos of her and Chris together. This wasn't just talk. They had proof of the depth and intensity of the relationship.
So this allowed the prosecution to really establish the stakes, the pressure Chris was under.
Exactly. Tara confirmed their relationship was constant, nonstop communication. She confirmed Chris professed his absolute love for her, that they had firm plans to marry. Fakesty. And the timeline became critical again.
What did she testify about the timeline?
She testified that Chris had promised to serve Cherie with divorce papers on May 5th, the day of the murders. Faked time, he'd apparently claimed some technicality, a typo in the papers, had prevented it the day before.
May 5th was the deadline he gave her.
It seems so. That May 5th promise looks like the final piece of pressure. Chris had run out of excuses for Tara. And we know, factually, from the investigation, that he had not filed for divorce. He hadn't even spoken to a divorce attorney.
Fact.
Oh, he was lying to Tara right up until the end.
It appears that way, which strongly suggests that the only way he saw to satisfy his mistress, keep her believing the divorce was happening, and save his $100,000 a year job was through violence. And framing it on his manufactured enemy. Theory.
So the trial happens in 2011. It must have been incredibly emotional, given the victims were his wife and young children.
Hugely emotional. And the prosecution faced a real challenge. They had to rely heavily on all this technical evidence, the IP addresses, the linguistic quirks, the rigor mortis timelines, and circumstantial evidence, like the paint receipt and the scratches.
Because there wasn't like a smoking gun weapon found with his prints or a direct confession? Right. And the very idea that a father, a respected community member, could commit such a calculated, brutal act against his own children, that's a massive psychological hurdle for any jury to overcome.
Prosecutor Chris Reitz really had the job of convincing them that the unthinkable was in fact what happened here.
Which explains why the initial jury vote was so divided. It came out later that the first straw poll was 7-5 for not guilty.
7-5.
Not guilty.
Even with all that evidence.
It shows the power of reasonable doubt, and maybe the emotional difficulty. The jury foreperson later said something like, I mean, we all thought he did it. Who else would have done it? Intellectually, they leaned towards guilt. Fact.
But they needed something more, something concrete to push them over the edge beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly. They needed proof, black and white proof, that Chris Coleman was fundamentally a liar, even about the small things. If he'd lie about the small stuff,
Then he could lie about the big stuff.
Precisely. And here's where the case takes its final, almost bizarrely mundane twist. During the 15 hours of deliberation, the jury was allowed to examine the physical evidence themselves in the jury room. Fact 2, this included a stack of personal photos. Photos of Chris and Tara together.
Okay. Just holiday snaps, things like that.
Presumably.
Right.
Happy couple photos. And one juror, just idly perhaps, picked up one of these photos of Chris and Tara looking happy together and flipped it over. Fax T.
What was on the back?
The date the photograph was developed. Stamped right there by the photo lab, October 2008. Fax TT.
October 2008. But wait, didn't Tara testify and Chris claim the affair only started in November 2008?
Exactly. That date, October 2008, directly contradicted their sworn testimony about when the affair began.
It's just 1 month difference. Why was that single month so absolutely critical?
Because it proved they had both lied under oath about the timeline. The prosecution had actually, perhaps strategically, tried to frame the affair as starting in November, maybe to slightly separate it from the threat campaign, which also began in November.
But this photo proved the affair was already well underway before the first threat was even sent.
Correct. And for the jury, particularly that juror who found it, that tiny discrepancy was everything. It wasn't circumstantial anymore. It wasn't technical. It was a concrete lie.
So that small lie about the start date? That was the dam breaking.
It seems so. The juror who found it later said, quote, that was something black and white in front of my face that said if he could lie about this, he's lying about everything. In fact, the integrity of his entire story and Tara's credibility as a witness just collapsed over a date stamp on a photo.
Wow, all that complex evidence, and it comes down to that.
After that discovery, the jury reached a consensus relatively quickly. On May 5, 2011, exactly 2 years to the day after he murdered his family, Chris Coleman was found guilty on all 3 counts of first-degree murder.
And the sentence.
Life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Facts, Tiffy. So, wrapping this up, the Chris Coleman case is just a terrifying study in control, pathology, and deceit, isn't it?
Absolutely. The sources just lay bare this life that was meticulously built on layers and layers of lies. He faked the threats, using his own computer, leaving his linguistic fingerprints all over them.
He bought the murder prop, the spray paint, with his own credit card and signed for it.
He fabricated an alibi that was medically, forensically impossible based on the time of death.
And he lied about the most basic facts of the affair that supposedly drove him to do it all.
And what really stands out, I think, is how this man, planning such a catastrophic, violent solution to what was essentially a financial and relationship problem, how he was ultimately undone. Not by some dramatic CSI moment, not by complex DNA necessarily.
But by the smallest, most mundane detail.
Exactly. The way he consistently misused an apostrophe, the way he misspelled opportunities, the objective science of rigor mortis setting in, and unbelievably, a date stamped on the back of a photograph from Walgreens or wherever.
His downfall was built on his inability to control the tiny details of his own massive lie. That arrogance, or maybe just carelessness under pressure, it's truly remarkable.
And he still denies it. In fact, Coleman continues to maintain his innocence, appealing his conviction. He's currently serving his life sentence in a prison in Wisconsin, actually, transferred there under an interstate agreement, likely for security reasons, given the notoriety of the case.
So if we connect this back to our theme, the larger picture of deception,
Huh.
it really makes you think, doesn't it? We often look for the big, dramatic lie. But here, the lie was so complex, so layered.
He used the truth of his high-stakes life, the job, the policy, the affair, as the very fuel for the mechanism of murder. It raises a question for you listening. At what point does the original motivation, the affair, the money, at what point does that become secondary to the sheer pathology of the deceit itself? The need to maintain the lie above all else?
That need to keep the $100,000 salary, keep Tara, keep the image, it just completely obliterated any moral compass he might have had. A truly chilling example of how lies can spiral into ultimate darkness.
Join us next time on When the Lies Began, as we dive deep into another case built on yet another fragile foundation of lies, one that also led to a shocking and ultimately tragic end.